If I stood here this morning and decided to yell, "Fire! Fire!" what would be your reaction? Most people, when they hear the word fire, there is a sudden jar, an intensity that just immediately hits you. You kind of wonder what's happening. And you look around. If nothing more, even if you aren't scared to death, you look around to see where the exit sign is. And you may even try to see who might get in your way if you needed to use it. I mean, even on an airplane, I don't listen to the flight attendants. You've heard the routine so much about the air and all that kind of stuff. But when they say it, I always look around to find where the exit row is, where the exit is. I think that is human nature. When we hear the word fire, there is an impulse to duck, run, or hide. It's scary. It's frightening. And yet the odd thing is we have a love-hate relationship with fire. I mean, it scares us when it's uncontrolled and when it's threatening and when it could consume us, and yet we like it when we can sit in front of a fireplace or around a campfire and roast marshmallows and have s'mores and things like that. We like it in that case, but in the case of wildfires in California, it scares us to death. I once tried to burn down our house in Colorado. Not on purpose, of course. But nonetheless, I did almost set it ablaze. We'd come home from Christmas Eve services and started a fire in the fireplace. It was real nice and put the fire out. Next morning, got up on Christmas Day, thought, well, we'll have another fire. So I cleaned out all the ashes. It's a lesson for everyone. I cleaned out all the ashes and I put them in a bucket and a pail and I carried them out into what I thought was a sufficient amount of snow and dumped them in the ground and went back in the house. And the next thing I knew, somebody was yelling, "Fire! Fire!" And we were all rushing to see what happened. You see, you would think that the snow would extinguish the ashes, right? But the ashes melted down to the snow and lit the dry grass underneath on fire, which went to the cedar fence, which went to all the neatly stacked lumber for the fireplace next to the house, which went to the cedar on the side of the house. And quickly. It's something I will always remember, primarily because no one in my family will let me forget. And so, you see, fire is a powerful and dangerous thing, and yet fire is something we can't live without. If you ever watch the TV show Survivor, where those people are put on an island and have to kind of get on their own, what's the very first thing they want to have? Fire. You can't live without it. And so that's the way it is. And it's even more important for me theologically because when I think of God, I think of fire. Fire is an image that works for me. I don't think of an old man. I don't think of a female. I don't think of all those kind of human images. Fire and light works for me because fire is something that gives to us. Fire is something that's the same and is ever-changing. Fire produces energy and power. It was on Sinai when Moses confronted God for the first time, confronted Yahweh, Jehovah, and how did God appear? In a bush that was burning but not consumed. And on the day of Pentecost, when those present were given the gift of the Holy Spirit, once again, how did it appear? Like fire on their heads. The difference is on Pentecost when fire appeared, and that's got to be kind of scary. We read that text and we go, okay. But if I was in church right now and one of you caught on fire and then somebody else, I'm sure it would be kind of frightening to see. Your impulse would be to, drop, roll, and stop, drop, and roll, right? Didn't say that in the book of Acts that they started knocking people over and rolling them on the ground, does it? No, the difference is that rather than running and ducking from this fire, they stood under it, they embraced it. They allowed it to ignite a fire within them. One might say that instead of stepping away from the line of fire, they stepped into the line of fire. And because of it, they were empowered beyond imagination. You know, you read the text, continue to read on, all those people, they came from what is now Syria and Egypt and Jordan and Turkey and all those countries that were divided into smaller countries. And all of a sudden, differences were bridged and community was built and a mission and a purpose was given to them that they did not have before. The church was born. The thing is, for most of us, you know, when fire happens, as I said, we try to get out of the way. We try to get out of the line of fire when they tried to stay in the line of fire. But if you don't stay in the line of fire, you never figure out how God works. We try to control fire, and yet God is the uncontrollable fire. And I really think that's probably what scares us. I think that's probably what keeps God at a distance from us. Because, you know, if you let God in, uncontrollable things might just happen to your life. You might be changed. You see, when the fire of faith ignites within you, strange things begin to happen. Instead of hoarding, you begin to share. Instead of worrying about what might happen tomorrow, you start celebrating what happened today rather than complaining about what you don't have or how life has done you wrong. You appreciate all you do have and the many ways that God continues to do you right. And then at the end of the day and at the end of the life, rather than just laying down and giving up and going down, you go down, but it's a different type of down. It's a worn out, it's a used up, it's a complete exhaustion because you've given back all that you had. You see, fire changes. Fire empowers. But God's fire, God's power does not consume us. It feeds us and it lights us up, and amazing things happen. The thing is, we want to control that fire. We want to contain it. We want to manage it when it's resistant to it. You know, we hear that word and we run for the nearest extinguisher or look for the fullest pail of water. It's fascinating. It is fascinating. If you go to Mount Sinai and the monastery at the foot of Mount Sinai, St. Catherine's, they will show you the burning bush that Moses saw. Or at least they'll tell you that's the burning bush that Moses saw. You can Google it, so go home and look. And if you look very carefully at the burning bush in St. Catherine's that you can't get near, look at the bottom, you'll find a fire extinguisher. I think that's such an irony that the burning bush that might ignite with the presence of God, they're ready to put out. But let's not laugh, we do the same. I really believe that God gives those of us in the church so many wonderful ideas, so many great things to happen that can happen, but more often than not, we ignore them or seek to extinguish them or we run from them. The church is often where great ideas come to die. So what does God do? God takes them elsewhere. I don't think God stops just because we do. God takes God's Spirit wherever it will go, wherever people will listen. And then we wonder why the church struggles to understand and keep up. You know what the biggest killer words in any group or any church that are spoken? Think about them, you've heard them. We've never done it that way before. We tried that once. It cost too much. We don't have the time or the resources. There's not enough help. There's not the right time. That's not our problem. Everybody's not going to like that. Well, it doesn't seem that everybody liked what Jesus said or did either, did he? But it didn't stop him. You see, few people recognize the change they need. Few people listen to the Spirit and allow it to ignite within them. Few people know what they need in life. Only God does. What did Henry Ford once say? If I asked people what they would have asked for a faster horse. We don't know what we need, but God does. And God gives it. And God wishes to ignite the fire in each of us. For I am absolutely convinced, the Apostle Paul writes, that neither anything in heaven nor anything on earth, nothing that happens today nor anything that happens tomorrow nor anything in all creation has the ability to separate those who love Jesus from the power of God. That's a big statement and a big promise, but you got to let go. You know, if you read further in the book of Acts, some of those same Pentecostal or Pentecost disciples are on trial. They've been arrested for evangelizing and preaching and going around, and they're in front of the Roman tribunes. They're in front of the Roman courts, and the Roman powers don't know what to do with them. Put them to death, sentence them to prison. They really don't know what to do with them. But one of the people who is in judgment turns to the other one and says, well, maybe we shouldn't worry, because if it is of man, if it is of human design, it will fail. But if it is of God, there ain't nothing that can stop it. Nothing. One of my favorite quotes comes from Abigail Adams, the wife of our second president, who wrote to her husband, John Adams' close friend, Thomas Jefferson, these words. She wrote to Thomas Jefferson, she said, "These are challenging times in which we find ourselves, times in which a genius would love to live." Friends, we live in challenging times, and probably none of us, least of all me, would claim to be a genius. But just because we aren't or we can't claim that doesn't mean we should deny the genius of God. That we should deny the genius of God. What is required to cease denying it is the willingness to accept, embrace, and to step into the line of fire, trusting that God does the rest. God has done it before. God continues to do it today. The question is, are we in or are we out? Because that is the challenge, the message, and the gift of Pentecost. Amen.